The election of Donald Trump as the President of the United States introduced considerable uncertainty in international trade, especially concerning vital North American partners. Among the most contentious pledges made by President-elect Trump was his commitment to impose a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, including crude oil, two of the largest oil suppliers to the U.S. This policy, aimed at safeguarding domestic industries and rectifying trade imbalances, has sparked worries about its potential economic fallout on both sides of the border. Canada and Mexico collectively account for over half of all U.S. crude oil imports, with Canada alone supplying around 3.8 million barrels per day, which represents more than 50% of total imports. Mexico, the second-largest supplier, contributes billions of dollars in heavy crude oil annually to U.S. refineries, which depend heavily on these imports to satisfy domestic energy needs. The proposed tariffs pose a threat to this essential supply chain, potentially leading to increased energy costs for American consumers and industries, while also endangering the economic stability of two crucial U.S. trading partners. Moreover, these tariffs could strain the long-standing economic relationships nurtured under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, possibly provoking retaliatory actions from both Canada and Mexico, who are contemplating countermeasures to defend their national interests. This brewing trade conflict underscores the intricate interdependence of the North American energy market and highlights the broader dangers of escalating protectionist policies in a tightly woven global economy. Canada is currently assessing potential responses to the proposed U.S. tariffs, with one significant option being the reduction or cessation of oil exports to the U.S., a decision that could have extensive repercussions. In this video, we explore these unfolding developments, examining the background of the situation, the implications for both nations, and the potential outcomes. Scale and significance. Canada's significance as an energy supplier to the United States is immense. As of 2023, Canada was responsible for about 62% of all U.S. crude oil imports, making it the largest foreign supplier by a wide margin. Each day, Canada sends approximately 3.8 million barrels of crude oil to the U.S., which represents more than half of its total crude oil production. This vital partnership goes beyond just crude oil. Canadian natural gas makes up around 25% of U.S. imports, primarily utilized for heating homes and powering industries in northern states. Additionally, electricity plays a crucial role in Canada's energy exports, with provinces like Quebec, Manitoba, and Ontario supplying hydroelectric power to U.S. states such as Michigan, New York, and Vermont. The interconnected electricity grids underscore the extensive energy trade between the two nations. Economically, energy exports to the U.S. contribute over $100 billion annually to Canada's GDP, supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs nationwide. Alberta, the epicenter of Canada's oil production, accounts for roughly 80% of the crude oil exported to the U.S., with its oil sands representing one of the largest crude oil reserves in the world, highlighting the vast scale of Canada's energy sector. Proposed plan to cut oil export. The looming threat of tariffs has prompted Canadian officials to explore various counteractions, with the drastic option of reducing oil exports being considered. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has strongly advocated for leveraging energy as a strategic tool, proposing a halt to electricity exports to the United States. This move could impact around 1.5 million American consumers, particularly in states like Michigan and Wisconsin that depend heavily on Canadian energy. In contrast, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith offers a more complex viewpoint. She opposes the reduction of oil exports, arguing that it would severely damage the Canadian economy, as Alberta is the primary source of crude oil sent to the U.S. Smith cautions that such a decision could destabilize Canada's energy sector, leading to revenue declines, job losses, and potential political turmoil. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has adopted a careful stance, advocating for a balanced and proportional response. The federal government is considering alternative retaliatory actions, such as targeted tariffs on U.S. goods like steel, aluminum, and orange juice. This comprehensive strategy aims to safeguard Canada's economic interests while avoiding unnecessary escalation. Economic and political implications. Reducing or stopping oil exports to the United States would create significant economic and political repercussions for both nations. For the U.S., such a decision would disrupt energy supply chains and drive up costs for consumers. States like Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, which heavily depend on Canadian crude oil and electricity, would experience shortages and increased energy prices. These disruptions could send shockwaves through the U.S. economy, particularly affecting industries that rely on affordable energy. On the Canadian side, the economic fallout would be equally daunting. Crude oil exports represent a vital revenue stream, and any substantial cut could hinder GDP growth, raise unemployment in the energy sector, and put pressure on provincial budgets. Alberta, in particular, would feel the most significant impact, potentially heightening tensions between the province and the federal government. The economic repercussions could also trigger a rise in inflation, complicating Canada's domestic economic situation. Politically, the consequences could be just as destabilizing. Cutting oil exports would likely strain Canada-U.S. relations, undermining the cooperative framework established by the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. This could provoke retaliatory measures from the United States, escalating trade disputes and diminishing the chances for a negotiated resolution. Alternatives to cutting oil exports. Canada is acutely aware of the substantial risks tied to reducing oil exports, prompting the nation to seek alternative strategies. One of the most notable options under consideration is the implementation of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods that are vital to certain states. This tactic echoes Canada's reaction to U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum back in 2018, where similar duties were levied on American products like bourbon, orange juice, and steel. Another viable strategy is the diversification of energy markets. Canada is actively investing in infrastructure projects, such as the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, to enhance access to global markets, especially in Asia. This initiative aims to lessen Canada's dependence on the U.S. as its main energy buyer, thereby granting more leverage in future trade discussions. Additionally, bolstering domestic energy security is a key focus. By investing in renewable energy and improving energy efficiency, Canada can decrease its reliance on fossil fuel exports while establishing itself as a frontrunner in the global shift towards clean energy. These initiatives not only aim to alleviate the repercussions of trade conflicts, but also resonate with Canada's long-term environmental aspirations. Mexico's plan of retaliation. In light of President-elect Donald Trump's suggestion to implement a 25% tariff on Mexican imports intended to reduce migrant flows and combat the influx of synthetic fentanyl, Mexico is exploring various countermeasures to safeguard its economic interests and maintain a balanced trade relationship with the United States. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has warned that if the U.S. tariffs are put into effect, Mexico may respond with reciprocal tariffs on American goods. She pointed out that such actions could trigger a cycle of retaliation, ultimately jeopardizing businesses that operate in both nations. Sheinbaum emphasized that one tariff would lead to another, creating a precarious situation for shared enterprises and underscoring the deep interconnection between the U.S. and Mexican economies. Beyond potential retaliatory tariffs, Mexico is also taking proactive steps to enhance its economic standing by addressing its trade deficit with countries like China and attracting foreign investment. President Sheinbaum unveiled a strategy aimed at replacing a portion of imports with domestic production while focusing on developing critical sectors such as automotive and aerospace. This approach is intended to strengthen Mexico's economic resilience in the face of external trade challenges. The Mexican government has issued a warning regarding the proposed U.S. tariffs, highlighting the potential for serious economic consequences. These could include the loss of around 400,000 jobs in the U.S. and rising prices for American consumers. The concerns arise from the intricate interdependence of supply chains, especially in sectors like automotive manufacturing, where parts frequently cross the U.S.-Mexico border multiple times during the production process. Marcelo Ebrard, Mexico's economy minister, has reiterated the country's commitment to seeking a diplomatic resolution to prevent the imposition of U.S. tariffs. Drawing on lessons from past trade negotiations during Trump's first term, Ebrard underscored the necessity of cooperation and mutual understanding to tackle common issues such as migration and drug trafficking. He also condemned the resurgence of protectionist measures, arguing that they would adversely affect both economies and could lead to retaliatory tariffs. In response to these challenges, Mexico is actively working to enhance its economic standing by reducing its trade deficit with nations like China and attracting foreign investment. President Sheinbaum has unveiled a strategy aimed at replacing a portion of imports with domestic production and advancing key industries such as automotive and aerospace. This approach is intended to strengthen Mexico's economic resilience in the face of external trade pressures. If you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting the like button to help us reach a wider audience. Your comments and feedback are invaluable, so feel free to share your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and let's continue. U.S. oil import. Let's examine the dynamics of U.S. oil imports from various countries. Canada has long been the leading supplier of crude oil to the United States, a status that has only strengthened over time. As of 2023, the U.S. imported around 3.8 million barrels per day from Canada, accounting for more than 50% of total U.S. crude oil imports. This figure has seen a consistent rise from approximately 2.4 million barrels per day in 2010, largely due to the growth of Canada's oil sands production and the enhancement of cross-border pipeline infrastructure, including the Keystone Pipeline system. The geographical closeness of the two nations and the compatibility of Canadian heavy crude with U.S. refining capabilities have facilitated this increase. Refineries located in the Midwest and Gulf Coast are specifically designed to process heavier crude types, which are plentiful in Canada's oil sands. In 2023, the value of crude oil imports from Canada reached an impressive $97.18 billion, highlighting its essential role in U.S. energy security. Mexico stands as a consistent supplier of heavy crude, ranking as the second largest source of crude oil for the United States. In 2023, the U.S. imported 4.261 billion cubic meters of crude oil from Mexico, valued at $2.35 billion. Although Mexico's crude oil exports to the U.S. have decreased from their peak levels in the early 2000s due to domestic production challenges, it remains a crucial supplier. The heavier Maya blend from Mexico is particularly well suited for U.S. refineries that are equipped to handle such grades. The shared border and trade agreements like the USMCA have further cemented Mexico's role as a dependable energy partner for the U.S. However, concerns regarding Mexico's declining production capacity and policy shifts that prioritize domestic consumption have raised doubts about its long-term ability to sustain export levels. Saudi Arabia stands as the largest non-North American supplier of crude oil, having played a crucial role in meeting the United States' energy needs. In 2023, the U.S. imported nearly 20 billion cubic meters of Saudi crude, valued at approximately $10.81 billion. Although imports from Saudi Arabia have decreased since their peak in the early 2000s, the nation remains a vital supplier due to its substantial production capacity, swift output adjustments, and the superior quality of its crude oil. The reduction in imports can be linked to several factors, including a surge in U.S. domestic shale production, a shift towards North American suppliers, and changing geopolitical priorities. Nevertheless, Saudi Arabia's influence in stabilizing global oil markets through its leadership in OPEC continues to shape its trade relations with the U.S. and other key suppliers. In addition to Saudi Arabia, several other countries contribute to U.S. crude oil imports, each exhibiting unique trends. For instance, in 2023, the U.S. imported 1.24 billion cubic meters of crude oil from Iraq, valued at $6.1 billion. However, imports from Iraq have been inconsistent due to regional instability and production hurdles, yet it remains a significant supplier. Brazil has also emerged as a key player, with imports totaling 10.65 billion cubic meters in 2023, worth $5.90 billion. Thanks to its expanding offshore production capabilities in the pre-salt basins. Nigeria supplied 8.43 billion cubic meters of crude oil in 2023, valued at $473 million, with its light sweet crude being particularly prized for its refining ease, although import volumes have dipped due to the rise in U.S. shale production. Lastly, U.S. imports from Venezuela have plummeted in recent years, primarily due to sanctions and political instability, with only 7.59 billion cubic meters imported in 2023, a significant drop from historical highs. Conclusion: President-elect Donald Trump's proposed tariffs on Canada, Mexico, China, and other major trading partners have sparked widespread concern about their potential economic consequences. The interconnected nature of modern trade magnifies the effects of protectionist policies, leading to retaliatory measures and cascading disruptions. The consequences could be significant, far-reaching, and long-lasting, with the U.S. potentially experiencing severe oil prices, increased costs for consumers and industries, and deepening economic strain. Canada, the largest supplier of crude oil to the U.S., accounts for approximately 62% of U.S. oil imports, or about 3.8 million barrels per day. The Canadian government is contemplating a countermeasure by cutting oil exports to the U.S., which would disrupt a deeply integrated energy market, particularly in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, which rely heavily on Canadian energy. The economic repercussions for the U.S. would be severe oil prices, increasing costs for consumers and industries. Retaliatory tariffs on American goods such as steel and agricultural products would deepen the economic strain, potentially leading to losses in GDP and employment in both countries. Mexico, the second-largest supplier of crude oil to the U.S., has signaled its readiness to impose reciprocal tariffs on U.S. goods. The Mexican government has warned that Trump's proposed 25% tariffs could lead to the loss of 400,000 U.S. jobs and a significant rise in prices for American consumers. Key industries at risk include automotive manufacturing, where components frequently cross the U.S.-Mexico border multiple times before final assembly. Retaliatory measures from Mexico could target U.S. agricultural exports, particularly corn, soybeans, and meat, which are crucial for American farmers. China, another major target of Trump's trade policy, has hinted at halting or restricting exports to the U.S. while redirecting its trade to other markets with a diverse global network. In 2023, the U.S.-EU trade volume exceeded $1.2 trillion, making it a critical partner in goods and services. Previous tariff disputes during Trump's first term offer a glimpse into the EU's likely response. The combined retaliatory measures from Canada, Mexico, China, and the EU would have a substantial impact on the U.S. economy, particularly in key sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and technology. Increased consumer costs, supply chain disruptions, and GDP reduction are expected to be the consequences of these escalating trade tensions. Outru. Thank you for tuning in to this video. We truly appreciate your presence today. If you found our content meaningful or inspiring, we would be grateful if you could show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your engagement is incredibly important to us. Don't forget to check out another video from our channel that's currently displayed on your screen.